I gotta do this more often. Let's talk about it. All right, everyone. It is I, the Dumble whose door is always open. Gandalf without the gray or the white because I'm all black. Jordan LaForge captaining this enterprise. And I'm not just Mr. Terrific, I'm Dr. Terrific. And I still believe in fair play. And allergies are kicking my butt today, guys. But I am still Left Eye Ego. And I am with the man himself who's living the life some consider a myth, using both the powers of the Jedi and the Sith. I've got my man Pops with me today. How are you doing, Pops?
I am happy to be with Left Eye Ego, who, as far as I'm concerned, is usually right. Yeah, man, let's do it, bro. We're gonna have a heavy talk. I think this is gonna be a little different for both of
Yeah.
us. But I come from that background, so this is actually more like I don't even know that I really prep for something like this. It's almost like just dusting off the cobwebs. Like, oh yeah, this
Yeah.
is kind of what you used to do is the side hustle. So, yeah, let's
Yeah.
get into it.
All right. So I think I've wanted to do this for the last few months. I know that I did this with White Bear on a live stream a few months ago, just about the different political parties that are involved and libertarianism against the conservatives or Republicans and liberals, Democrats. And so I've been wanting to do it for a while now, and just hadn't had the time to really do it. But Pops and I will generally have our talks off camera, and we have a lot of similar beliefs when it comes to the general theme of libertarianism. So I said, hey, let's sit down, talk about it from our perspectives. And we're telling you guys up front, we're not going to be like the whole voice for all the libertarians out there because there are a few different ones. It's just that this is where we've seen libertarianism and where it's been for us. And this is our journey and our road to how we got there. And we'll even tell you guys, some of our influences that you can check out for yourselves, or if you want to check it out for yourself, some of the materials that we've read or we've seen. And I'm actually going to be talking more about this with Pops because he's lived more sort of the libertarian lifestyle a little bit longer than I have. So I wanted to get someone's perspective on it who's been living that lifestyle a little bit longer than I have. So we're just gonna make it it's casual conversation on here, but just trying to hit the points, trying to be kind of serious, but I mean, it could go either way with us. So we'll get right into it. So Pops, first things first, how would you define libertarianism and why would you consider yourself a libertarian?
So again, there's such a broad spectrum of these things. We're going to upset or alienate somebody with however we define terms or however we approach
Inevitably.
things or whatever. So listen, I don't know about everybody else. I will try to come up with like bumper sticker perspectives on things sometimes. For me, I'm more of a let's just strive for freedom, to
Mm,
maximize freedom and minimize interference from a third party government official. Now, that can be local or federal. The further you will get away from me, the less I want them to have any influence in my life. So
right.
that is the Uber bumper sticker slogan S version of how I approach libertarianism.
Right.
I also know that I'm more of a populist type libertarian, where I also know that while this may be sort of an end game, and the end game may feel or be described in a very sort of like an anarchy type of Michael Malice version of where the end game could or should be. I know that it's a process, and sometimes the
Right.
process offends other libertarians or other folks. I'm like, well, that's because we have to have actual application. We can't just believe that you burn the house down and then your utopian version of the world is it's going to be the one that will come out of those ashes. That sometimes reformation is going to come one person at a time, one step at a time, 1 year at a time. And I definitely understand that. So that's kind of the general overview of I say definition, if you will, or at least my perspective of how I see myself in this landscape.
Okay. I got you on that one. I definitely understand the populist take on it too. I will say this. I mean, as far as I guess the movement of libertarianism goes, I didn't even know what that was until like 2018. And my friend Exhibitor told me when I was living in Philly, and I had no idea what that was. I heard libertarian. I'm like, hey, dude, I don't run around naked trying to hug trees because that's what I try to take the root word. And I'm like, I'm
Right.
not that, sir. But how did you come to find out what libertarian was? Like, what was your first experience with it, or how'd you hear about it in general?
Because I came from such a like I really had I had a far left family upbringing with Democrats only, Republicans are evil, rich people kind of stuff. And really, to be honest, even through high school and stuff, grew into college, like just very apathetic about politics, like whatever,
Oh,
like it was just a
wow.
thing.
Okay.
I kind of I remember like voting in this election, but not that election. I was very easily like, it was like talking points during like Desert Storm, it's all money for oil. And I didn't understand any geopolitics at the time or anything like that. And really kind of, because I'm a movie, comic book, entertainment kind of guy. So that was really where I
Yeah.
spun my wheels. Those arenas have and will always be dominated by left leaning individuals. And so that was kind of the culture that I was kind of in. And I was really, though, not an advocate for any of those things or belief systems. I was just very apathetic about it until 9/11. 9/11 was a game changer for me.
Mm, okay.
It felt way bigger, and I felt very small and ignorant of things. And I felt I needed to at least try to educate myself. I was very blown away. It was like day 4 or 5. The newspaper was talking about some of the folks that were behind it. I don't even know if we should say their names on YouTube anymore, but those folks that
Yeah,
were
I
behind
guess.
it were named in those papers, and I went down the rabbit hole of who they were. And that was kind of
Oh,
how I went and just become reading. And I remember reading these books. These books were like this big. One of the authors was like these Bodansky books. I always called them the Bodansky books. These massive encyclopedia type things of these. They'd chronicled so much history and interactions of different people and political people. And of course, then you're at that rabbit hole. Who are they and why are they there and that kind of thing. And this journey took me through a lot of self-discovery, like what I would believe. And I just basically just started reading every extreme from Rush Limbaugh to Michael Moore. I would read both,
no.
right?
Okay.
And I've been in the science field, worked in the science field my whole life. So it was very quickly, very fact and historically event driven. Like that was how I
Yeah.
was assessing information. So that's kind of how I evolved. So I evolved very quickly into realizing a lot of my beliefs were very generic and were easily torn apart. Like I wouldn't have been able to defend pretty much anything against some of the premises that were being put in text. And that's kind of how I rolled through most of the 2000s until the
Hmm.
Iraq, Afghanistan thing started to switch. And I had a lot of pushback, especially from lefties and anti war people, because I was like, look, guys, we got to go in and we got to do what we got to do. And I've confessed to my own naivete that I thought when we went to war, that meant you laid waste to something. You took care of an enemy. You took something out. You destroyed something. And I didn't have any knowledge nor presumption that our strategy was to nation build and nation replace and all the things that we were actually going to do. Because I was
Yeah.
like, that wasn't what I thought we were going to do at all. This isn't what I signed up
Right.
for. And then around 2007 to 2009, everything changed, right? So the economy bubble burst. My own personal life's being
Yeah.
devastated financially because of that. I was caught up in some of that stuff. My job stuff was interesting because I met a diehard libertarian, right?
No. Okay.
And then, of course, everything you knew about the world was changing because of the war, the geopolitical landscape, and President Obama was coming on the scene. The campaign was coming on the scene. Hillary versus Obama stuff was happening. So all of that coming. And I had also read a book prior to that.
Okay.
Because I've been writing, I've been doing reviews, website work, that kind of thing. And I read a book called Bias by Bernie Goldberg, who worked for CBS. He worked in political campaigns. So basically, he was intricately describing the inner workings of the media, how they write, how you can kind of pick up on their bias and their own agendas and things like, and how far left they were. Like they would cheer in elections, and he was always kind of off put by
Yeah.
like, what do you mean? Like that's weird. We're supposed to be the journalists, and it was an eye opener for me because at that point, then I couldn't unsee it. I would see a news article
Mm,
and so, for instance, you would have the description of this event happened, and depending on
Hmm.
who you are, it might describe that person as white or black, but it would only be
Right.
done on the agenda that would drive the narrative. So little things like that, it's like once you see these things, you can't unsee them. So now my world was kind of broken because now I was not only rapidly consuming information, catching myself up on all this life of ignorance, I trying to lift myself out of that. I felt like I didn't know who to trust anymore because half the media was incredibly
Hmm.
corrupted and not telling me the truth. So this friend of mine who's become my business partner, very close friend, Robert Harriman, kind of turned me towards this alternate philosophy, this alternate belief system that I kind of very only cursory kind of understood libertarian existed. I knew of like a Ron Paul libertarian, but he wasn't really because
Right.
he's a Republican. So I'm like, I didn't quite understand what that meant. I didn't understand how this played out at that point. 'Cause I didn't understand the inner workings of things, right?
Sure.
So but then I got down the rabbit hole very quickly with different books. So Tom Woods was a big one, but the big game changer for me was when I got books by Thomas Sowell and Walter Williams. So
Mm,
Walter
yeah.
Williams is a George Mason professor, and Thomas Sowell is probably the greatest thinker of our modern
All
times, as
time.
far as I'm
Yes.
concerned.
Yes.
And conflicted visions sort of changed everything for me because conflicted visions is his way of understanding sort of a conservative versus a leftist mindset. And I think if we take that and then we add in like the male versus female mindset, where men tend to be like, it's a problem, let me grab a hammer and a wrench and try to fix it, or there's a threat, let me grab my spear and go protect the tribe, versus the females who are like emotional driven, like protect my cub
Mm,
and prevent harm. So when we add in conflicted visions, which is about these philosophies that come from a geopolitical standpoint, so we added all of that together, and my worldview was getting clear very, very quickly, and I
mm,
realized conceptually better how governmental infrastructure was doomed to fail. There's really not a way to make some of these things work on scale. Like in in philosophy, sure, maybe public educations and maybe some of these different things could work, but once you end up with like the hundreds of millions of people that we're now at, now we're 330 to 350 million people that we're at now, the scale has now broken the systems down. Like they're
right.
not even remotely efficient, and there's just not a way to undo that. And as I was unpacking all that ego,
Mhm.
then I was reflecting on my own life. Then I was
Okay.
picking up breadcrumbs of things that I had personally gone through. So I worked at the university, and I must not have been a sophomore or junior. And I was asked to go down to the basement and throw everything out of this room. And they
Oh.
did it so they could fill the room back up with stuff from upstairs because they had to do it to spend all the money so they could justify the budget to get more money. And I
Okay.
was like, didn't click until almost 10 years later, right? So it's like, oh
Right.
crap, this is so then it's like, okay, so that's one moment. So you're going through these different moments in my own life of like, okay, so wait a minute. So I wasn't really getting a tax refund. I was just paying myself extra to get my own money back. And oh,
Right.
wait a minute. So whenever I was charged extra when I cashed in this retirement fund and they took all this money, it's because of this type of taxation. Oh, I see. So they're just stealing from me because they didn't need to do that. It was biased based on my age because I was too young. If I was 59 and a half, you wouldn't even have done it. So it was about my age. You just wanted to
Right.
have that money sitting there so someone else could earn interest on it instead of just me.
Right.
So my own personal experiences started to kind of plug in the dots. And this is where my worldview kind of took shape. And at least, and again, this is like 2009. And again, we're watching the President Obama, I call it the cult of personality, which we can dissect a little
That's
bit because
fair.
that starts to change my perspective of the parties.
Right.
But that's how my general framework was really adjusting very, very rapidly.
Okay. I am glad you actually walked me through all that because I actually had the opposite upbringing of you, which is hilarious because you said you grew up around diehard liberals. My immediate family is diehard conservative. I'm talking my parents loved the hell out of Ronald Reagan. My
Mm-hmm.
mom thought George Bush was a cutie pie. She nearly had a breakdown when Clinton didn't get impeached. And my dad was like, you know what, son? We went to war over a 2% tax on like tea. So, if you pull up to DC after a day when your side didn't win, hey, you know what? I don't condone it, but I understand. And
Hmm.
so I didn't even know that liberals were a thing until midway through college.
Wow. Hmm.
And I got there in '05. The thing is, I went to because of your faith, you know exactly where I went to school. If you guys
Yep.
don't know, it's a school that has a monument of hands that pray. That's all I'll say without saying their name. I went there when there was a dress code. And to be honest with you, I actually had twists in my hair. I actually had to undo them because the hair couldn't touch your collar. And then they gave me the bright ideas like I should perm it. If I ever find that photo, it's awful, it's
Oh
terrible, but it did
man, that's
happen.
money right there. That's a
It
thumbnail. That's the
oh yeah, it
thumbnail.
was. I
Yeah,
need
I
to
gotta talk to Shiro and get that in a thumbnail. That's for sure.
yeah,
That's
I
thumbnail
gotta
gold right there.
I gotta call my alumni and see if it'll work. If
I
they
want
can
that for
find the
coming to
photo,
America. I want to do like a coming to America video just so I can have some ego glow commercials made up for sure.
I
So
I actually had that. I'm not gonna lie. I really
I
it looked
remember it.
just like
There
the
is no
model. I
shame. If
know.
you live through it, it was a
I
thing. So that's
yes.
I am not throwing rocks.
It
Yeah.
was yeah, sorry to segue you guys on that one,
It's
but I
like us
think
white people having our mullets. It's like, did you have a mullet?
that
Like,
is
okay, how many of us didn't have mullets? Like, that's just a. It's
it
like
was the
saying,
thing, guys.
my brother didn't have a Jerry curl and I didn't have a mullet. Is like, okay, who's lying more? Like,
Somebody's
will
lying.
the person
Somebody's
telling the
lying.
truth please stand up? And we're all just still sitting there. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
And so I think, like you were saying, kind of the foundations for questioning certain things was there. I remember that the day I turned 16, which is like literally the day after Christmas, my parents were like, happy birthday, go get a job. So I hopped on Mongoose bike with the 4 pegs on it, and I rode my bike a quarter mile to McDonald's, right? Got the job. I remember this specific, I got paid $5.40 an hour, and I remember working 19 hours. So I'm doing the math and saying, okay, if I make 549, I do 19 hours, that means I should make this amount. I saw the amount. I didn't say it out loud because of the household I grew up in. But in my head, I'm like, who the hell is tax?
Mm-hmm.
Who is FICA?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know what Social Security is. I'm sociable and I feel secure in myself. So why am I paying for this? And then people try to tell me, it's like, well, hey, it's towards your retirement. I was like, but I'm not retired. It's for when you retire. I was like, okay, so am I going to get all that back? They're like, yes. I'm like, cool, all at once, right? They're like, no, they're going to give it to you every month.
And they're
I
going
was
to
like,
tax it again.
and they're going to tax it again. I'm like, wait, okay, but I mean,
Because
isn't
technically they
I
claim they didn't tax it. And they're like, oh,
right?
gosh, you
And
guys are
I'm like,
cheaters, man.
yeah. I was like, wait, what? And I said, does that mean that I didn't know what the stock market was. I just knew people put money in things and you hold it there a long time to give it back to you with more money. Like, does that happen? They said no. So I'm like, this doesn't make sense, but whatever, because the way I grew up with conservatism is, you want less government. At least that's the way it was for conservatives when I was growing up. Excuse me. And it got to the point where, they actually, for the 2008 election, I was actually on campus and they were actually registering people to vote.
Hmm.
So, of course, it's implied because of where I went to school, we know how you're voting, right? And I was like, I was red till I'm dead for that one. I didn't know any of the candidates. All I knew was like, hey, the Lord says that the proper candidate is not the one with the cult of personality, okay? Especially
Spoiler
not
alert
with
for
his
any of
middle
you who have
name.
never read the Bible. Spoiler alert. There are no parties named in the Bible. There's
No,
no denominations. So whatever your church told you, that there's no denominations in there either. So
exactly.
in case you've never read one or don't know what we're talking about, just so you guys know, spoiler alert
Right.
from a person of faith who's read it, knows it well.
All right.
No, that's in there. Just so you know. Just so you
Exactly.
know.
Yeah. And so, I didn't even know any of the candidates. All I knew was like, hey, you're gonna want to vote this way. And it's like, okay, so you vote down ballot. And my buddy who was, still my close buddy now, I knew who he was gonna vote for, but I'm like, you're different, I get how you live. It's you would do that. And so, okay, so Obama wins that election. And so, he wants to celebrate first black president. I'm like, you know what? I guess so. I've never seen it before. I didn't really care one way or the other, but like we go out to celebrate. And then when people ask where you went, you're like, we went to pray because this country is, just I know what's going to happen to it. It's not the country, that we're used to. And I pray for our country, for the soul of our nation, as they would say, right?
So were you just
And
going through
so
the motions at this point, or did you actually really believe or care much about any of this?
I just know that when you are young and people make you think that people that are older than you are generally wiser than you, and that the advice that they're giving you is supposed to be for your benefit. And as you grow older, you figure out that's not always the case. It's one thing to be upfront with your agenda, like, hey, I only care about A, B, C, D, E, F, G. That's fine. And I would like you to go there, but you don't have to. It's
Hmm.
kind of like if
Okay.
someone in Texas says they want to learn more about football, and you just throw a Cowboys jersey on them and say, come with us here. And when we cheer, you cheer. When we
Hmm.
get mad, you get upset.
I got
And
you.
they don't tell them any of the rules, how it works, the history of it, why it's popular, why people don't like it, why people like soccer or
Your
rugby.
your team sport analogy is very well put as well too, because I felt so. Because for me, at this exact same time frame you're going through, I
Mhm.
had, again, I'm in the informational deep dive during
Right,
the Bush administration and the war. So between like 2005, 2007, the anti-war movement was really strange for me because I just didn't understand. So I was getting a whole lot of information from people who couldn't really defend things. And again, I'd
right,
read all these books, right? So I was kind of being a jerk to people because I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. So and so
right,
never sat at the table with so and so. So and so never did this to so and so. So and so never did this either. We lied. No, there's no weapons. There's no this. There's no that. Well, yes, there were because we have this evidence and this evidence and this evidence. Well, that's not what so and so said. That's what like. Why are you
right.
listening to so and so whenever the report, the document says that? So I was already struggling with all that, and I was struggling with what I had unearthed. Again, I was writing and researching, right? So
Mhm.
the NSA program and the birth of the monitoring,
Yeah.
the post Patriot Act stuff, and all that. And it was like
Snowden.
this
Yeah.
unhinged stuff that was getting unearthed by other people. Like people,
Yeah.
you know who Julian Assange and WikiLeaks are,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We were covering all that stuff, and they were sending us documents, right? Because we're running this
Mhm.
website, right?
Right.
And what my problem with that was is we didn't care about people's names and safety. Because I said he may have some good intentions in there, but he was careless about other human beings' lives because he was unearthing people who were like embedded into dangerous situations and putting their name on the
Right.
web and whatever, things like that. That's different than Snowden, who put forth the names of programs and slides. And that's all. Again, I had all this information. We all have. So this wasn't like as secretive and whatever they act. It
Right.
was offensive. So
Yeah.
imagine getting to Obama and like yourself, I'm seeing, well, the country's changed. And I got to be honest, I can identify with Snowden a lot because I've heard him say this. I thought everything would change. This guy promised to do all these different things. So I
Mhm.
thought these certain things were going to change, and I thought some of those would be positive, even though I had like you, like the people around you at your church college, of the world could be hell in a handbag. But I also had hope, like, oh crap, he may actually end the NSA, he may actually end the wars, he may actually, you know, do all these lefty things, and none of
Mhm.
that was manifesting within the first 45 to 90 days. And I was like,
Right.
where did all you anti-war people go? It
Right.
was crickets. There were no more protests. None. Zero. It was
Yeah.
like, what is going on? I don't. Where's all the NSA people? Where'd you go? Where are you
Yeah.
going? Hello. Where are
Exactly.
you? It was really a rough fight. So we put our flag into about that 2008 2009 for sure. So then go ahead back to
Yeah.
where you're at on your journey.
Well, that was the thing because what happened was, originally, guys, I'd be upfront with everybody. I want to go to med school, and because of where I went to school, it wasn't necessarily prioritized over, let's say, wanting to be a pastor. All right. So my grades might have been there, but my MCAT score, pretty much the SAT for med school, was not there at all. So one of my professors meets a professor in Philly who's got a program for people in my situation. I'm good academically, but I need help with the testing. So, excuse me, the dean of my biology department talks me in as a recommendation, and I wind up in Philly like the next year. And worldview got flips, not mine, but everyone's perspective was different. Not only did people not think I was not only did people think I was a Muslim for some reason, but it was automatically assumed that I was a liberal. And so it was just everything was assumed. So
Well,
when they
you're a
found out
black
that I
dude in
was,
Philly,
I see,
right?
I didn't know that. I'd never
So you
been that
didn't know
far
that you were
east.
from a deep red area to
No,
Philly, which is like what 2% Republican, maybe. I'm probably
pretty
being
much.
kind. Like those
I,
are
I
secret Republicans. They're the rich people who don't want their taxes. They just don't tell anybody they're Republican. They just do vote
yeah,
that way.
I
Yeah.
found out most so like the northeast part of Philadelphia is for the most part by and large conservative. And
Mm.
so like I'm out there and I'm just like, what is going on? Why is this man dressed like a rabbi yelling at white people in the middle of Center City? I have no idea what's happening. This is completely nuts. And so, it was on like that for maybe about 4 or 5 years. And I met my friend Justin Ice, and we would just talk about the way people see things and how it can shape their worldview. And then because of that, they claim one side or the other. And
Pick
so,
a team.
yeah, it's pick a team, it's
Hmm.
red or blue. And I honestly think modern day politics is the new sports. And so I talked to, um, my man Excipitor, and he's telling me about libertarianism. Actually, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I actually started because I was friends with Justin Ice. He would tell me about different books. For me, I think worldview for me was pretty much limited to America. So he put me kind of on the Robert Greene trek. 48
Hmm.
Laws of Power, Art of
Hmm.
Seduction, 33 Strategies of War, Mastery, the 50th Law of Power. I think that's with the rapper 50 Cent. That's out there too. And you start seeing the way that the things that we're doing, we've technically always done. We might have called it something different, or we may not had a name for it then, but nothing is really new at
Oh yeah,
all.
it's like when your brain doesn't know what to do with the fact that you find out that the Barbary Wars was us fighting Islam under Thomas Jefferson, and you're just like, okay, hold on, I don't understand. We identified this problem under Thomas Jefferson, and now we're still having conversations 200 years.
Right.
Like, wait, I don't. My brain was like, wait a minute,
Right. Yeah.
um, yeah, so let me. 'Cause I want to unpack where you are because I
Yeah.
want to try to run our
Sure.
parallel timeline because you're
Yeah.
in
I like this.
from
Yeah.
2009, 10. You want to go 4 or 5 years. So for me, that's when I'm really finding libertarians. Like I'm meeting.
Sure.
This went in a campaign. I got to ask a question.
Oh
But by the
wow.
way, this was the best. My milestone moment was one of these. I'm in a room. It's a very small room for press. I'm in the front because I was excited to meet Ron Paul.
Hmm.
All the media's behind me, so it's like the TV stations and the newspapers and all of that.
Uh,
So he walks in the front. He's just kind of being kind. He reaches over and shakes my hand right away, and I get to ask the very first question because I'm in the front and I was smart. Like I was
goodness.
nice to the guy, and I asked this very hard hitting question about like how he would cut spending. He would basically pick a pet project from both sides and he would cut both of them, and then the newspapers started asking like stupid questions. And there was this moment, like I don't know, 20 minutes in, he stops and he goes, "Do you have another question?" I'm like, "Yes, I do, sir." It was so good because it just realized it was all just dopey talking point nonsense. He's a Republican, so he's bad. Didn't matter if he was libertarian or
Hmm.
not. Didn't matter if he was anti-war or not. Didn't matter what he wanted to do. Just they all had their agenda, whatever.
Yeah.
But I kind of befriended one of the candidates. I understand how the candidates would try to operate to run as a libertarian, but it was like
Okay.
it never made sense to me. But I was trying to figure some of that out.
Okay.
So yeah, it was really an interesting time because that was the Tea Party time, right? So the Tea Party
Yes.
kind of was birthed out of libertarianisms and Ron Paul and those type of people, but it got hijacked a
Mhm.
little bit by sort of like libertarian leaning or esque, or at least pretending to be Republicans. And
Mhm.
we did get good candidates. I will say this: it's very hard, I think, to keep your scruples in the machinery of Washington D.C. I've read books, I've interviewed people on this. I can't
Mhm.
imagine trying to live through that. So I don't. I will say I don't hate Marco Rubio. I think he's just an evolution of the machinery. Like he's just over time it's just going to wear you down. Even
Yeah.
even Rand Paul I think is significantly different from his 2010 self to now. I think it's just
Mhm.
significantly different.
Mhm.
But we ended up with a lot of change. But you have to remember too, this is the middle of them pushing through Obamacare during Christmas break and things like
Yeah.
that. So I was very, very. I mean, I'm in the weeds at this point. We're on Google News. I'm getting hundreds of thousands of views on things. We're
Wow.
breaking stories. I've got people calling us. It was crazy. I realized in hindsight, if I knew what I knew now, you know what I mean, I would tell myself to quit my job and do it full time. And
Okay.
here's how you would navigate to move forward. Here's how you would steer. But you don't know, right? Because you don't understand what
Yeah.
algorithms are at that point. You don't understand
Yeah.
what the machinery is going to look like. You don't understand how to leverage time for news, because news is not a profitable business. So you have to figure out how to
Uh,
leverage time, right?
mhm.
So it kind of parallels where you're at with Philadelphia, because I think it's very interesting for everybody to understand
Yeah,
like
definitely.
social context. 'Cause I think
Mhm.
what's interesting about our journeys is it's also a backdrop for how much America changes during this time. Because
Yes.
America
Yes.
is radically changing. I'm sorry about President
Yeah.
Obama. You may love or hate him. It doesn't matter. It's radically
I see.
changing during this time frame. He's taking office.
Well, I mean, I think the thing is that the president you elect or that gets elected is a reflection of the time frame you live in. So
Hmm.
I remember someone said that JFK was the first TV president
Yes.
because I remember he was very presentable, looked amazing, and Nixon did not want to wear makeup.
Yeah,
And
he and
so
Nixon
John F.
did the first televised debate, right? And
Right. And
Nixon's sweaty looking, didn't quite look right.
right.
JFK
Right.
he was all makeuped up, he was all buttoned up,
Right.
he looked manicured, so
Yes.
he looked like he
Yeah.
had it together, and he was someone presidential and you could trust.
Right.
And Nixon looked like he was stressed and in over his head. 100%
Right.
agree. Seen the videos myself. Yep.
Yeah. And so I'm saying that after that, they were saying that Obama was the first social media president, which made
Mm.
sense. Big campaigns, a lot of viral tweets, retweets, Facebook, Instagram, it was all over about it. And he did not mind being seen on either one of those platforms, either with his photo, an interview that someone would post on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, whatever. And so, come to Trump, and I think the thing is that people are mad, but they didn't understand. It's like, what were we consuming for the last 8 years, at least in popular culture, prior to him getting elected? It was reality TV. And so if you consume that, you make it a big thing, not just the Apprentice, not just Wrestling Federation, the Kardashians, the Bachelor, the Bachelorette. We consumed a lot of reality TV. And so you wind up electing a president representative of reality TV.
Hmm.
Now, I don't
Okay.
know what other presidents are going to be after that, but it's like that was a pattern that I was seeing. And that's something that Justin Nice and Acceptor and I had already talked about, is that your president is kind of reflective of the times of either the media we consume or what we're using at the time. And so,
Let,
go ahead.
let me pull up the thread if I could. I
Go
would
ahead.
define Obama a little bit differently. Instead of being like a
Go
social
on.
media president, I think he was the
Okay.
first one to capture what I call cult of personality.
Okay.
So in February, in the middle of the primary, remember March 1st is this big primary date, right? But I think it was February. But someone could fact
Okay.
check the dates for us. But he goes to Germany to give a speech to get all these people. And I was like, this is exceedingly weird and strange how this was handling. And my far left friend came from California. We've already
Mhm.
had all sorts of bumping of the heads along this way. And I
Yeah.
brought this up and I made a comment about his socialist policies. I said, it's interesting. He goes to Europe and all of his socialist policies are all cheerleading and whatever. I think that's very offensive that you would call them socialist policies. I'm like, what? They're
Yeah.
socialist policies. Like, I don't understand. Like, spread the wealth around is not anything other than this was not a
Right.
judgment of my morality of them. This is just the assessment of what they, but it was
Look.
like, he walked right into like the racist card, right?
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, interesting. And then, of course, gay marriage is an issue, and that was being politicized and hijacked too, where Obama's rhetoric, agenda, and execution was changing. And the same friend made a comment because I said something about the slippery slope of that. I said, I don't understand how this will play out within the structure of our society and our legal
Mhm.
system. Because once you change the definitions of this
And
is
that.
defined
Yeah.
as this, then where's the end? It's a slippery slope argument. It goes, this is not a political issue. This is my life. And I'm like, that's
Oh.
a weird way to take what I just said. So I think cult of personality, and what I mean by that is not just he captured social media, because he also did other things. He went on like late night television. I think he may
That's
have been the
true.
very first one, or he's among the very first things, but it was how he approached late night television. If you watch his interviews, it's like the casual guy hanging out, being one of the friends, his fundraisers with the reporters, these type of things. It was very, very friendly with all that. Like I said, there was a massive Halloween party when Alice in Wonderland came out, where Johnny Depp and the other cast members actually got into costume for the Obama Halloween party at the White House. So there's pictures of the Obama Halloween party, and it's like Johnny Depp in full on Mad Hatter costume. It's crazy stuff like that. You're like, this would never have
Mhm.
happened previously. Okay.
Okay.
And when you evolve through Romney, who was this generic vanilla
Yeah.
candidate that the machinery pushed through, when there were other things I think the general people were talking about, and then Romney was treated like, I don't think any of us looked at Romney and thought that, he's a womanizer and he's all of these very sort of like malicious things, but the media went that angle
Yeah.
and they pushed Obama through. And then Obama changed and become very aggressive in his second term with how he
Mhm.
attacked any criticism. And that was also when it was coming to light, like he had been monitoring the reporters. We got more information on what happened in Benghazi. We found so a lot more information. Was Hillary was disappearing. We took her out of the equation,
Mhm.
right? We put her in the shadows because some of the stuff that she'd been doing was coming to light. And you're like, okay, what is happening? By the time you
Okay.
get to Trump, Trump was the only candidate to be like calling them names, kind of like he was the voice of everyone being frustrated, right?
Yes.
And he was also like not the machinery. Like everyone's sick of the machinery. We're sick of the same old Congress, the Republicans that don't do anything. They make some
Yeah.
conversations and promises and whatever. And we're supposed to cheerlead the fact that they don't raise the debt or they don't do. I'm like, what are
Right.
you talking about? Like, this is not, I think, where the finger on the pulse of what people want are. And he
Mhm.
become a finger in the eye of the machine, not just Obama. It
Right.
was all of it, I think, in my
All of it.
opinion.
Yeah.
And my friend was brainwashed against the normal Republican. It was crazy. I
Mhm.
remember talking to him again, primary, Cruz, Cruz and Trump. And I made a comment. He goes, "Oh, Cruz would be way worse than Trump." And I always thought to myself, I've got to remember to ask him how that aged, because
Yes.
that was his take. And I was like, wow, there's something crazy when this type of manipulation is going on with how
Mhm.
the political thing swings. And I will say, for someone like me who got knee deep into this during the Bush administration,
Mhm.
I was chest deep during the Obama administration. There are intricate things that I covered and talked about and regularly did interviews, some radio shows, all this kind of stuff, right? The
Mhm.
pendulum's swinging, right?
Yes.
And what was occurring to me was all the people who talk about how the president is a figurehead and the political machine and not much really changes, and how they're like, and this is one of my first principles. I'll definitely bring this up when I do my own show
Mhm.
on this show, to be honest.
Mhm.
The moment you can know that Trump and Pelosi have a lot more in common, McConnell and Schumer have a lot more in common with each
Mhm.
other than us. Once you
Yeah.
understand that, then it's easier to understand what we're dealing with. When you can
Right.
see the fact that, when we go into this election, that Trump and Biden have way more in common than they do with us, it's easier for you to
Right.
understand why that pendulum and why things don't really change. Yeah, yeah, I don't want to tell you.
I
That's one of the
no,
first.
just
It's a first principle. You got to at least understand what you're dealing with.
I called it rubber banding at the time.
Hmm.
They fix a thought and they try to pull it as far as they can, and then at some point either they let go of it all at once or it snaps, and it
Hmm.
either snaps in the other direction, or the whole thing just falls apart. And so I'm saying that because what was happening, I was seeing how people were getting upset about things that didn't make sense to me. I was in school until 2016. I'll put it like this: I've been in some form of school since the age of 4, and I didn't get out until I was 30.
Yeah,
So
med school's like
imagine
that.
me, yeah, and school was like that for me. So imagine getting out and then going on a date, and your date asks who you voted for. And I'm like, I just got a job like 2 weeks ago. I didn't do enough research to even know who was on the ballot, which is what I had to tell them because I didn't know. And so I didn't. I was like, what does that have to do with us being at I don't even know what restaurant I took her
You were
to
Trump
back in
tested
Greenwich.
then. You were Trump
And,
tested if you had voted for Trump or not.
and that was the weird thing, is that
Hmm.
again, everyone assumed because of the way I looked, I was liberal, but it was black people asking me, which was confusing to me. And
Hmm.
so
Okay.
I said, I didn't do enough research. I just came back here. I did a residency in Colorado. I just got back, and I just got a job like 2 weeks ago after trying to find one for 3.5 months. So please, can you enjoy your spaghetti and your vodka soda? You know. Anyway, but I mean, it got to that point for me, and so
But
I
see,
just
that's
thought,
something that I want to spin my wheels there for. That's
yeah,
fascinating, though, because you firsthand experienced what Trump changed. And what Trump did change was it made an enemy of people that supported him. So factions of people view anyone who supported him
mhm,
as a quasi enemy of the state. And I know
right,
that's even more so now because now they're trying to equate everyone to January events. But
right,
it started then because if you
yeah,
put him in office, you're to blame. You're
right,
responsible for this Russian spy, this Russian
right.
collusion, and all these different things. And I will be the first to admit, for those of you who want to
Mhm,
know, did not vote for Trump the first time. Couldn't do it. Didn't know what I was
mhm,
getting. Couldn't trust him. We as a family had family discussions about this in my
yeah,
house. So what are we all comfortable with? Like there's
yeah,
different principles and things that are kind of like non-starters for us. And
mhm,
we actually pulled the lever for the constitutional candidate. It was
that's
some
fair.
people call that the throwaway vote, but that was the one that gave me the most peace consciously.
Right.
Was like I can now down the ballot,
Different
we
story.
would
Yeah, yeah,
we were all over
yeah.
the map based on different candidates, and there were some
Right.
skips. I
Yes.
I have no problem skipping whole blocks of like there's no good candidate there,
Right.
none
And
whatsoever.
that's
Yeah,
fair. Yeah. I mean, the
yeah,
thing was is that,
but yeah, a Trump date, man, you got a
yeah,
Trump date. That's
it was
crazy.
weird. And the thing
Yeah.
was is at that point I had to like, I said, you know what, I need to start from the beginning. I need to read the Constitution. So I think I either read the Federalist Papers and or the actual United States Constitution. And so I read, and it's a small pamphlet. If you guys want to get it, you can read it. So I read the
Yeah.
entire United States Constitution, right? And on top of that, I would try to catch up on world events, just read about them if I could. And I started learning about the Bill of Rights, excuse me, our amendments, which is why the second one is near and dear to me, is because I was reading that. And so, I mainly read it as protection against anyone trying to influence me to put on their jersey for their team. And
Hmm.
so, and just looking at all these jerseys, my buddy Exhibitor is like, well, hey, have you heard of libertarianism? Because he'd gotten me onto listening to Young Ripa, and he would say weird
Mm.
things to me like, what is taxation of theft? I was like, I agree with that. Can you say that? I mean, it is, but I mean, is it? So he would say, hey, you listen to Young Ripa because he's a libertarian. I'm like, what? So he gets naked and hugs trees too, because that's what that's what that means. He's like, no, 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 it's a
You don't
political
want to see me
affiliation.
naked hugging
I,
trees. That's not
I
good for
don't. That's why
anybody.
I was
I
like,
don't want.
this sounds
I don't
really
want to
weird.
see me doing that.
And so I'm listening to him give his perspective on libertarianism. I'm hearing Exhibitor talk to me about it, and Justin Ice was one as well. So, it's the three of us talking about it. And while I'm listening to the things, I'm like, well, hey, this makes sense. I really like the fact of private property rights. Why am I paying for something? I thought I bought the land. Why are you still making me pay for the land that I bought even after it's paid off? Or, um, pretty much leave me alone. If, and I think what it made me rethink of the time that my wife and I went to an upstate New York last month for a wedding, and we're walking through like one of the farmers markets, and I'm looking at people go there and say, "Hey, I've got cheese. Would you like some cheese? I would like some cheese. I'm willing to pay you for the cheese. Oh my goodness, I have this wonderfully craft wine. Would you like the wine? I would like the wine. I'm paying you for the service of your wine." I'm like, we used to do this.
Hmm.
And why is it that now someone that had no interaction with either one of you and no business being in your business saying, I want the money that you made from that to pay me the state that doesn't do anything? It's like, oh, well, who will fix the roads? I know that people in general come to agreements. And if a town could come to agreement saying that for 7 miles of road, we're going to pay this person to do it, we would come to agreements on our own. I know that's because that's usually the pushback is what would we who would build the roads. But
So I
what
will let's go to who fixed the road real quick. So Pop's take on
okay,
who fixed the roads.
go
How
ahead.
about this? I don't. Let's just assume I don't know the answer. But how about this? Can
Mhm.
we get transparency from the government agencies of how much is being paid and to whom to being paid and what
That's
I
fair.
want this to be publicly posted that we can review
Right. An
because
audit.
that's the problem. The problem is not that, oh, we just magically put money into a fund and the roads are getting taken care of. Well, I don't know what cities these people live in where the roads are so great because to me, there are roads and interstates that are under construction basically perpetually. And there are
Right.
projects to me that appear to go up and get fixed right away
Immediately.
if it's a
Right.
new subdivision or a new shopping center. But there's
Right.
other areas that just they're left there for months on end and no one ever doing anything. At 2 a.m.
Right.
when I drive by them, they're all standing around. No one's actually doing anything. And I'm paying for that. So
Right.
my first rule is even if that's a fair argument, let's just start with the you tell me that you'll be transparent with that
Mhm.
data and information. And Ego, now that you're out in the world, you know now, the moment you look at something,
Mhm.
things start to change.
They do. And I think that was the issue is the fact that I am not a hardcore Trump supporter at all. But when he first got elected, I was like, you guys do know that. I mean, the way you can look at it is the governor is the president of your state. So in my mind, being the president is like finding out you're the president of your freshman class in high school, more or less.
Hmm.
It's based kind of like on popularity a little bit. You kind of have a lot of power, but you still have to have the other states kind of go along with it, and you can get vetoed as well. You could try to overrule it with a what was the word looking for? Executive order, not action. Those are different. But by and large, you have to get people to agree with you from different states. And so the outcry was weird to me. And I was like, but you've got a Democratic governor, a Democratic district attorney, you've got all these other things. And when they try to do the impeachment, I was like, well, the Constitution says you've got to get like 60 senators to do that. I don't think you've got the numbers there. And the
Mm-hmm.
fact that they did it twice, and I said, hey, it's the same thing. I'm like, this is weird because I'm looking at the handbook or the rules that you guys made, and you're trying to violate them to get one person
Yeah,
out.
they don't. They don't. So, I think when we look at what's interesting to me, again, I can hate everybody because
Mhm.
that's pretty much how I feel. I don't care for any of them. It's fascinating to me, though, that the Democrats will be very transparent about what they want to do in accusing a Republican of doing something.
Mhm.
The rules don't matter. They will change the rules in 2010 when they have a Harry Reid rule and the filibusters. This is what we'll do. We got to get Obamacare through. We want 51 votes. This is what we're
Mhm.
going to do. And then later, we cry foul when that party uses that rule to
Mhm.
just get their freaking nominations in. Like Trump was treated terribly with Senate confirmations and things like that. It was all like,
Right.
for the first time in like U.S. history, some of these things were being stonewalled and whatever over someone who had already held an office. Like it wasn't like some
Right.
rando that he plucked, because he plucked plenty of randos. There were other weird things that he was doing that we could have actually cried foul about, but
Mhm.
instead we were crying foul over these mainstream things of them using rules that they had already put in place. And I thought that was my first red flag. And that's more like when he
Yeah.
took office in 2016, right?
16. Yeah.
2016, yeah. So that was kind of like the first phase. And what was interesting, I think, for the early Trump years, in contrast to Obama years, was because I actually this was actually a little claim to fame. It got me a lot of credibility in the liberal circles because I
Yeah.
actually knew Sonia. I put Sotomayor on a short list. So this is like early on when that first happened. She was on a short. It happened twice because I had put Sarah Palin on a short list for like a VP candidate, and
Mhm.
the editor was like, "Holy crap, you knew?" I said, "No, it's not really no. It's just you can kind of gauge the temperature of the room and
Yeah.
blah blah blah." But with Trump, it was like a wild card crazy, man. You didn't know what was going to happen. Like it was nuts. And then they turned on Brett Kavanaugh in a way
So fast.
that was
Yeah.
so strange. Like I'm a news guy. I'm able to fact check. I know the game. And it was like, there's no there. Like, I don't have any meat on a bones legally. Like, I get,
Right.
hey, bad character arguments, but it's like that was not how this was playing out. This was playing like legally, like they were ready to like lynch this guy. Like, it was
Oh,
nuts. And I was like, huh. So everything under this Trump guy, the rules, he's breaking the rules just by existing and doing what he wants to do. So it's
right.
an equal opposite, like your rubber band thing of we're going to break the rules. And that was, then
Right.
this led right into the Russia thing because it would become like 3 years of this Russia thing. And again, it wasn't that hard for us to get copies of some of this,
Not really.
dossier type stuff and things like that. I'm like,
Right.
this is all a bunch of like bar and cafeteria talk stuff and hearsay stuff.
Right.
And then when you found out they got a FISA warrant on it, because that was to me the gameplay. When you told me that you took, you know, Ego heard somebody at the bar say this, he came to me, told me it was an issue. I just wrote a warrant. That is insanely against our normal practices. And it was sort of like swept under the rug as far to being normal and acceptable. And that to me is what the Trump era exists. It existed this crazy 4 years of just unbridled chaos. And
Yeah.
I have to be honest, as sort of like the libertarian in me, I just kept going, isn't this a reason why we don't want them involved in our
Any of
lives?
this.
Isn't this a reason
Right.
why we don't want to
Right.
let them have any power? And then we got to the shut the coof, the outbreak.
Well,
But
yeah,
yeah,
that's what I'm trying to say. It kind
yeah,
of goes there because at that point, for me, it's like, well, I thought you guys tried to pull this on Clarence Thomas in like the 90s. Like I was a young
yep,
kid, but I was like, it sounded
yep.
familiar. It's like, am I watching a rerun from 30 years ago? And so,
Pubic
that
pubic
was
hair on a Pepsi can.
yeah,
I
it was
wasn't even into
so
politics.
weird.
I wasn't even into being like anti-Republican. I didn't even know what Republican Democrat really would be for a judge. I thought the judges were sort of like kind of like
Impartial.
outside of that.
Yeah.
I was so naive, and it was I mean very vividly remember the
The
hair on the
pubic
Pepsi
hairs on the
can. I'm thinking to myself, I mean, I'm not trying to judge man, but it's just a black dude, like just a hair on a
yeah, and
Pepsi can. Like I don't
how's
what
that supposed to look like? Yeah, exactly. And
what
so
yeah.
yeah, and so for
And we
me
and
at
we
this
skirted over
point,
Bill Clinton lying to me because I have to admit I took that part personal. That was kind of a red flag for me. I didn't mean to change my world, but the um, I didn't type stuff
yeah,
over and over
over
again.
and over. Yeah.
Even someone like me was kind of like, okay, dude, now you just like, why didn't you just come
Stop talking.
clean?
Yeah.
You did some stuff. I'm embarrassed by
Exactly.
it, but I can't undo what I did. The
Right.
fact that he would just double down on it, I was so turned off by
Yeah.
that. So anyway, sorry to rewind a couple
No,
of
might as
little,
well.
almost like little benchmarks in this
Yes.
journey, in this process that kind of make you.
Yeah.
It made me feel even less comfortable supporting some of these people, if that makes sense,
Right.
because you see
Well,
these patterns.
and I think the main thing for me is like I was starting to get disillusioned with the whole thing because I was like, well, hey, you guys aren't following the rules you set forth. Like, I'm not gonna try to just make this a whole thing about apologizing for this guy. I'm just saying that there are rules in place, and you seem to be violating to go after someone that you have personal vendetta against. But I don't know what's going on. So I think the thing that came to a head for me was the fact that I forget her name, but it was a situation that happened in Kentucky, the no knock warrant situation, where
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
and so they said it was a no, they had a no knock warrant. It's in dispute whether or not a knock was made or not, or an announcement was made, but we knew what the outcome was, and Rand Paul actually got it put into law the that you can't do any no knock warrants,
Hmm.
which is I'm like, you know what, you really should announce yourself because hey, I don't see or hear so well. You pound on my door, you're not selling me Girl Scout cookies, is my immediate thought. And because of the Second Amendment, I'm going to be prepared for that kind of aggression placed on me
Yeah.
when I didn't initiate it, which I'm like, yo, that is kind of a libertarian thing to do. But I saw people got mad at him, not knowing that he's the one that came up with the law that was supposed to save people from essentially agents of the state coming after them. Because I know that there are people that a lot of conservatives say back the blue, thin blue line, all these other things. And because of where I live, I understand that. It's just the fact that I said you also have to know too that they are agents of the state, and whatever they are told to do, if it means protecting or providing for their families, they might go out and do it. And so I was thinking about that thing, and then the disease of unspecified origin came about, and it was the fact that I was seeing people that had to stay in their homes, could not go outside, could not exercise, could not be around family, could not be around loved ones that were in poor health. And this is for me when I was working as a traveling doctor at nursing homes. So all I remember was one day they said, "Yo, wear a mask because everybody's sick." And then I didn't know what's going on, but I was seeing how they are making decisions for me without having any direct interaction in my life, not
Yeah,
knowing I like to exercise, not knowing that, you know, you should be outside to get some vitamin D and take some zinc. I
sure.
should be able to visit family that are in poor health. I should be able to visit my family, period, because I control my life. You don't know what's best for me. And I don't know where you get off thinking that you know what's best for me when, at one point I was laid off for 10 months and all I did was read all the information that was coming in, all the information. I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. So when it came election for 2020, I had a spreadsheet of about 40 candidates for the election from all the way from local up to federal at that point. And so I said, hey, for me, it's I need you to have these three qualities. And if you don't, I'm not voting for you, red or blue. I don't care. And as like I'm like, oh wow, this is a libertarian candidate that agrees with these things. This is one, this is one, this is one. And so it got to the point where I was thinking, well, why am I asking for permission for any of this? Do you know
Hmm.
what I mean? It's like if we come to an agreement on something and I assume responsibility in the event that it doesn't go my way or your way, who is a third party to come in and say that I'm not allowed to do that because of this reason or that reason when we've already discussed the benefits, the pitfalls, and the trade-offs? Why are you involved at
Yeah, we
all
should be
in
allowed
the
to
discussion?
negotiate our own transaction. Sure,
Right.
sure.
And so, and I think that was the main thing is between the disease of unspecified origin and the, I think her name was Brianna. The,
Yeah,
with
it's
that,
Breonna Taylor. I was going to
Brianna Taylor.
catch you
Yeah,
up on the
that's right.
Breonna Taylor.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
the fascinating thing about Breonna Taylor was there's no way for him to win, right? Because he's a white guy dealing with
Right.
a black victim case. So
Right.
Democrats hate him. How dare he
Right.
have something actually to do? Republicans hate him because it comes across as being anti-cop because he sounds like he's siding with the victims. So
Right.
it's a lose-lose. And Rand that's what libertarian is going to be. Libertarian is going to be
Hmm.
you're not going to have any friends. Everyone's going to be mad at you over something.
Yes.
And to be fully transparent, business partner and I own and still own an Outbreak News, a disease, health and disease, infectious disease. He's an expert and genius in that field. We run this website.
Wow.
We were covering this stuff in October. Was the first story in China?
Yes.
Stuff
Yeah.
was happening overseas, and we were reporting all of that. And we had gotten all of the past references to that word
Hmm.
demonetized. So from the beginning of
Yeah.
time to then, didn't matter. They
Yeah.
demonetized all that.
Hmm.
But what got us in hot water, to be honest, Ego, was as scientists, we were covering the outbreak through Europe and Italy in particular. We're like,
Hmm.
listen, that's not a third world country healthcare system, and it was collapsing on itself. We're giving very specific data, and it bled over into UK where we're getting actual videos and live feeds. And as a religious person, I was basically supportive of temporarily until I get more data. I do think it's wise to not have church full of old people. I need more information to know that it's safe. That is February, not
Oh yeah.
not
Yeah. Yeah.
not okay. Now, by April, we didn't need to do that anymore. We knew we had enough information about staying away from each other, what we now term social distancing, what some of the PPE equipment is. Like this is the kind of things that you guys need. We knew masks were not effective. That whole lie was just, I mean, I can remember pounding that drum like, this is a complete waste of your time and money, guys. This is
Right.
not going to work. Just stay away from people. Your
Right.
trick is just don't get near sneeze distance of people. That's pretty much all the mask is good for. Once you got to May and you started having, we'll call them exuberant rallies in the streets,
I like that.
and
Exuberant rallies in the streets. I like
and
that.
no one seemed to care.
Mhm.
I was like, well, screw it. I guess all bets are off. You can go back and do whatever you want to do. And I was all about
Right.
writing articles that were like, because I live in Florida, and I was all about my governor. Yeah, open those beaches, man. Get everybody out in the UV light. It's good for it. We'll go back to our lives. And now I never stopped working because I work in healthcare. So I had to have like
Right.
a FEMA pass so I couldn't be stopped and things like that. There's all
Yeah.
sorts of things that went into play. I was very blessed to be in that situation. But at that point, I'm also cheerleading like, why isn't everybody else going back to work? Especially
Right.
if you're healthy and 40 and young, the workforce population of 50,
Yeah.
25 to 50, and you're healthy, whatever. There was no data for kids. There was no, so what I was witnessing was my worst nightmare as a libertarian.
Right. Yeah.
Authoritarian psychopaths. I found out the CDC is this political machinery.
Yep.
We knew the WHO was corrupt. My business partner and I, we've covered stories to know the WHO was
Okay.
corrupt, but it was way worse than we thought it was, right? So
Wow.
we were
Okay.
seeing things that were like, well, if I wasn't a libertarian yesterday, I sure would. My wife moves.
Yeah.
My wife has moved radically towards libertarian anarchism and leave me alone and F the other side. Like she is
Yes.
radically, quickly. She gets mad at me because I don't have my finger on the pulse of news like I used to. She'll say, "Did you see this story?" I'm like, "No." I'm like,
No.
I can't tell her. I was watching a Quentin Tarantino movie. I don't have time for that kind of nonsense. No, I was watching Batman animated series. I don't have time for that nonsense. It's like because I'm with you. The pendulum is just going to keep. It's not changing. What
No.
really changes, and she
Right.
points out things that kind of do, but if a Republican wins the next election in the first 90 days through executive orders that we've allowed these numbnuts to do, they're going to change back 16 to 25 things back to the way the other team wanted
Yeah.
it. And it's like, it makes my head hurt because they should never have this
Yeah.
kind of control. And
In the first place.
yeah, and that's what makes headlines. It demonizes people and all that. So I know we had questions we were supposed to get through. I know I probably helped
Look,
derail this conversation all over the map for
it
folks,
was.
but this is our
I like
word
the
vomit of
yeah.
our process,
Parallel
basically.
stories. Yeah,
Yeah,
I know.
yeah.
Like it's our parallel stories, and we're pretty much taking you guys from I guess what 2000 to like 2020. So it's like the experience of that. And I will say, I'm in science and healthcare too, and so when I was laid off from about March of 2020 until January 2021. And so, I've always defined myself as either a student or a doctor, never just me. And so,
Hmm.
while I have the time to just be, I'm bored and I like to read. So I'm reading everything. So when that FDA study came out, that was 46 pages, I read the whole thing back to back.
Hmm.
And I was like, I'm not so sure I should do this.
Did
You
people
know,
now change? So this is there's Overton window principles and things like that, but did
Mhm.
people now attack your credentials because you could read a paper and give your opinion on it, but you didn't
So
have the right background? So how dare you? Because that's what I run into.
I will say that
I mean, like a close relative attacked me, ego. A close relative goes, "You're not a
I
doctor." I'm like,
I did
"I'm not a doctor." Like, wait a minute.
I
So it's okay for me to read a paper, write a research protocol, do the type of
right.
science work that I do, not getting into too many words, the surgical procedures that
Yeah.
saves lives, things of this nature. But
Okay.
you're telling me I
Right.
read an infectious disease
Disease
paper
article. Right.
and I can't tell you what it means?
Yeah, and it was.
What?
I will say this. I have relatives that if, hey, I coughed and my back hurt, what's that mean? And I'm like, I'm not that kind of doctor, but based on what you told me, you might have pulled a muscle. You
Mhm.
should probably see said specialist
This type
about
of
it.
doctor, right? Yeah.
Right.
Same
Or
response I would give. Yes.
Right. Or just like, hey, you know what? I've been feeling really like low energy and I'm kind of overweight. I was like, well, have you been drinking? First of all, have you been drinking water? You've been sleeping? Perhaps you should get some exercise. Maybe talk to your primary care doctor about that. Or you know what? Hey, I'm taking like X milligrams of Tylenol. And I'm like, that's way too much just for like your general health.
One of the few drugs that you can actually OD on very easily, folks. Please stop
Right.
taking so much Tylenol, people.
Yes.
Please
Yeah. So
talk
I'm
to your
like,
primary care doctor about
yeah,
alternating your pain meds appropriately and not just popping
right.
pills. Because holy cow, people are
Yes.
going to get
And I was
sick.
just like, you should just lower the dose to that. But hey, you should verify that with your primary
Yes.
doctor. And so when it came to this, all I did was sit and read for 10 months. And so I
Wow.
had relatives that went ahead and made the decision, or they would ask why I didn't. And
Mm.
it's like, well, I read all of it and seems kind of off to me. And I'm not sure if that's something that I want to put in my body, but I
He's
agree
so
that that's your
politically correct,
decision.
folks. He's so politically.
Yeah.
You can tell that I'm the old guy in the room. So we had a staff meeting, socially distanced, and I raised my hand. I said, "Basically, isn't what you're describing a flu shot?" And
Right.
that's not exactly. I said, well, okay. Then they went on to their little diatribe or whatever, and I said, well,
Right.
wait a minute, isn't it mean I'm that guy? I am that guy who made the room gasp, and coworkers come up to them afterwards, going, I can't believe you said. I'm like,
Like,
what?
why not?
It was supposed to be an open forum of questions. I can read the paper same as they
As
can.
you, right. It's
What the
I guess
heck?
I'm more like Credible Hulk. When I get angry, I come back with facts and evidence. Okay. I've seen that
He's
meme
changing
before.
his
I'm like,
name. He's Left Eye
yeah,
David Banner. All right, I got it.
thank you. Yeah. No, and so the thing for me was the fact that when people were saying why I did asking why I didn't get and telling me why I should, I was like, well, hey, CDC says this percentage, like, hey, 94% of people that did not make it already had severe pre-existing condition. And so if you're telling me the survival rate is 99% with people that live within this age bracket, and I'm in that age bracket, I don't have any pre-existing conditions, and I've seen and heard what the side effects from this are based on the FDA release, then I'm not going to do that. And the thing is, they would say, you should get it to protect your family, blah blah blah, trying to it ends up being a guilt trip. And then my one of my buddies that was the one that voted for Obama when I didn't, he actually messaged me about the 201 event, and I actually read it, and I'm looking at the intersection of science, politics, entertainment, and media. And so I read it in maybe February or March of 2020, and I saw the entire thing play out in 10 months to the letter. I mean, you could say what you want about conspiracy
Yeah.
theories, this conspiracy that, but it was just like, but it seemed that everyone else was in on it. It didn't matter if your jersey was red or blue, everyone was seemed like they were in on it from the start. And at that point I said, if I can read this for myself and come to a decision for my own life and not putting that on anyone else, then I should be able to make the decision myself. And that pushed me, further into libertarianism. And that's kind of where I am today. I mean, but as far as all that,
Does
I guess
it? Does
what?
it? Let me follow up question you with that because it
Yeah.
surprised me, and it should not have surprised me. But it was worse than I expected. Maybe that's the best way to say it. Then it was
Yeah.
worse than I expected for people that are willing to, because what we're getting into, to me, where we're at right now, with Democrats and Republicans in particular, and social dynamics and things like that. People that tend to be on the Democrat libertarian side, Democrat liberal leftist side, not libertarians.
Hmm.
Democrat side, they have no problem outsourcing most of these decisions and responsibilities to an authoritarian figure of some kind. I was
Right.
surprised since the 2020 event on the right how many people were so quick and willing to outsource their health care decisions to an
Right.
authoritarian figure of some kind. Like it was very, I shouldn't have been so shocked, but I felt like because we were dealing with people that for the most part, had defined many of their decisions by a lot of fact driven and data driven statistics and things like that in other topics. But it seemed like in that one, the scare tactics and things like that worked so quickly. I was very, very, again, I shouldn't have been shocked, but I have people who are like staunch religious conservatives. They race to get the right medical
For
injection to
option.
make sure that
Yes.
they stayed compliant with whatever. There are people who did things that have regrets because certain excuse documents suddenly had to be accepted, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, because I was one of the ones calling the bluff, and it was like, Oh well, no,
Yeah,
no, no. We didn't mean everybody. And like, oh well, that's what memo said. And I'm
right,
like, well, I'm
right,
not participating in your game.
right.
So, all right, that's interesting. That
Yeah,
so much transpired for you so quickly. Man, oh man,
yeah,
that's a
and
crazy
that's
3 to 4 years for you, brother.
yeah, but that was why, I the good thing is that I have always had a love of reading. That's from both my parents. And so I liked reading as just a general hobby and escape, but you figure out that you're going as you get older, you have to read and you have to learn because it winds up being kind of an armor and shield of itself. And sometimes it's a sword to make your own attack back if someone is trying to aggress on you with what their indoctrination is. They want to put it on you. You know, I know people say sticks and stones may break my bones and words will never hurt me. Well, then you've never seen, a document for a warrant for your arrest, or bringing you up on charges on paper, or someone writing a recommendation that you lose your job. An attack is an attack, whether it's a physical attack or it's words written on paper saying you can or cannot do something. And so you have to learn these things and you have to know how the law works because it directly affects you. And I think that for a lot of people, both red and blue, they'd rather outsource their freedom to have the illusion of the option that, hey, someone's protecting me. And for me, it's like, well, true freedom, having your own property, your own rights to yourself, the fact that you want to be left alone, you don't want to be aggressed upon, is terrifying because
Hmm.
it's just you. You've got to form
It's
your
it
own
it
alliances.
really is. I can give a very personal example here because I
Yeah,
just recently have gone through an active shooter class, and they very clearly talk about the first 3 minutes. That's the average response time in a big city. Now, when they say 3 minutes, they mean somewhere on the premises. They may not be going to the right building or the right floor or whatever. So,
mhm,
3 minutes plus however long that takes. And I thought to myself as I'm sitting there watching the room, not squirm by that ego. Like no one seemed uncomfortable with the concept of those first 3 to 5 minutes are on you.
everything. Yeah,
I'm like, no
terrifying.
one else appeared fidgety or weirded out or like raising their hands or wait a minute. So this happens. I got my first 3 to 5 minutes as my problem, and I may be in an area where I'm not allowed to protect myself.
Right,
Huh. And I'm watching a room full of highly intelligent people not appear, again, it's on them, not appear
right, right.
uncomfortable. Like I just to me, I'm getting angrier and more volatile, and I want to know like what it is you think these people are going to do in the manner of Christ. Like, what is it you think you're going to do for 3 to 5 minutes? Like, this is nuts. Like, I don't.
Right.
I mean, this is crazy. So, I kid you not. Again, I don't want to sidebar too much, but at one point they were talking about how you can use a window as an exit. I'm in Florida, so our windows they're all hurricane proof. You can't break them. So no one raised their hand. I raised my hand and brought it up, and the HR lady that was like 4 rows ahead of me goes, "I was going to ask that question." I'm like, "Sure you were."
Man,
When the person tries to take this chair and throw it against that glass and it ricochets back in their face like Thor in Ragnarok, that's what's going to happen. Like,
and now we've given away our position. Now they know where
yeah.
we are.
So it is so spot on that you felt that way because people are just so comfortable of just living in the fantasy of look at TSA. We are 20 plus years from 9/11 and people are still taking off their shoes and belts and all this nonsense for like
Not
one rando here, one rando there, make up all these random policies and stuff like that. And you're just like, I don't want to
and,
participate
and you
with
know
any of
what
this
the funny
nonsense.
thing is? If you pay $80 for
You don't have
TSA
to.
pre-check, you don't. I was like, wait, so if I pay you money, you're not gonna make me take off my shoes.
Yeah.
Like apparently, like the poors have to do.
Seems like the perfect concept for a book or a movie, but I might be
Yeah,
outing myself there on an idea that I
yeah,
had. But
yeah.
yeah.
Hey,
So I know
keep it's yours.
we're running on some time, but I want to get to
Right.
'cause I want to pick your brain too, because about like
Yeah.
who are the people that you like listen to or reading right now? Like what are you doing now to kind of
So
keep growing or developing or learning a new take maybe or someone else, something like that. I don't know. What do you got in the wheelhouse for
Uh,
me?
so I will say, the first thing was just learning the general. I guess if you want to just keep it to America with some European influences, I listen to a lot of Thomas Sowell to understand how people have acted over time in general.
Hmm.
Thomas Sowell's uh, Black Redneck, White Liberal was
Yep.
one of them. That
Yep.
was a really good one. Um, the Economics of Race, I think, was another one that he put out there.
Uh,
Know Your Bill of Rights was a good one for me. I think the thing is, I wanted to get to like the brass tacks of libertarianism. So I had this here. It's Libertarianism by Eric Mack. It's
hmm.
kind of dense, but he's got a lot of examples in there. I think my favorite example is a concept of redistributive justice, like kind of like reparations, and just short story long, it was saying that if you have 10 apples and I get 6, you get 3, and YouTube gets 1, right? And someone comes around and says, YouTube only gets 1 apple. That's not fair. They should get 7, Ego should get 2, and Pop should get 1. And you're like, well, but it's my apple tree. You know what I mean? And we've agreed to share, and YouTube says, I'll just take 1. That's it. And that's fine. We've all agreed to that. But someone from the outside comes in and says, for whatever reason, that is not a good idea and tries to redistribute
Hmm.
the profits. And you're like,
Hmm.
that doesn't work, because what's to stop someone from coming in down the line and saying, Pops doesn't get enough apples. Ego shouldn't get any apples, even though it's
I can
his
say
tree.
worse than that. Yeah, worse than that is that somebody comes in and goes, "Listen, did you see who Ego had on his show? That guy is
Right.
terrible. You shouldn't have that guy on his show. In fact, Ego
Exactly.
shouldn't have
Right.
any apples. And
Exactly.
Pop shouldn't even be allowed in the orchard. So I don't understand what you're doing. So then
Right.
YouTube net result for new YouTube was they get 0 apples because
Just
they cut off their distribution to
exactly.
the Apple department. And it's
Right.
yeah.
And then
Mhm.
and then it's just like straight up socialism. Our apples, comrade.
Yeah.
So
Then you get
so I
pieces of apples.
you get pieces of apples,
You get
right?
GMO applesauce, and you're told
GMO
they're
apples.
apples. It's what actually
Exactly.
happens.
And
I'm a Michael Malice guy, and I love
yes.
Malice's show because he brings in all these crazy guests. So you get
Yep.
exposure to people that I don't really know much about. So I think that's always
Right.
good for me personally.
Right.
Obviously, he and Dave Smith are very close friends. So Dave Smith also has a show,
Um,
and Dave Smith presents and they're not really aligned. Like I think Dave Smith tends to be a more nuts and bolts libertarian, a little outside the normal sort of like political party libertarianism, which is not where I would feel comfortable anyway. And I agree
right.
with you about Ripa. Obviously, Ripa and I, are almost cut from the same cloth as far as like our belief
Right.
systems and our love of comic books. It's really fascinating. I almost feel bad sometimes. 'Cause I feel like I'm doing something that could be echoing or mimicking something Eric would say. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at as far as that part of it goes. Because I don't spend
Okay.
much time on geopolitical stuff like I used to. I just don't.
I understand that.
No, I spend more
Right.
time listening to more of the social engineering and social commentary in the wake of the pandemic. Like, what has happened? What
Yeah.
have we done to men? What have we done to children? What is sort of like the motivation to run a business now, like just a lot of
Fair.
like the nuts and bolts of like culture and society. Because I think the pandemic broke everything. All the rule. I think
It
we
did.
took all the Scrabble tiles and threw them in the air. We knocked the board over. So I'm just trying to figure out like what are the new rules even going to be? Like what are the challenges we're going to
Right.
deal with? Like for instance, we have no real frame of reference of how bad
It's
social
going. Yeah.
media and electronics are on like young, uber young children. Because
Right.
now children are growing up in a world where you seen these videos or not, where these kids are like in their sleep or almost asleep, where they're just like they're swiping like fake, like there's no
Mhm.
nothing in their hand. They're just like they do it like a twit, like almost like a natural response, and it's like that's a freaky thing, man. It's like we're there now, though.
I yeah, I mean, we'll probably talk about later, but I heard about toddlers forming parasocial relationships with influencers, like
Mm,
children that are the same age that they see them do something like review a toy or they're on social
mm-hmm.
media, and the kids think that they're actually friends. They think that, hey, we're supposed to meet up for Halloween. It's like that kid doesn't know you. You don't know that kid, and
Right.
so that was one thing. But I mean, with the way life is, I try to read things that'll kind of keep me kind of even. So I know that I was listening to Becoming Nobody by Ram Dass and Psycho Cybernetics about having a healthy self concept. Just because when you get bombarded with a lot of information, you're trying to dig and you're trying to find, you can kind of get disillusioned by the whole thing. But it's important to keep the perspective of you're still you. Life has gone on before you, life will go on after you. But for the here and now, you've got to be present while also trying to pay attention to what's going on around you. But I think it's also good when you get to talk to people with similar beliefs, because after a while, you think that you're the crazy one. And you just need to
Hmm.
verify, like, hey, am I crazy because I read this and I heard this, but this happened? And I
Interesting.
want to make sure I'm seeing it, because if I don't, I'm going to think that something is wrong with me, which is
Hmm.
why I'm glad we get to check in on certain things with you. I check in with Justin Ice, check in with Exhibitor, check in with my guy Stuntman. We're constantly checking in on each other just to make sure that, am I seeing this correctly and as objective as I can? Not trying to make a bad guy out of a good guy or a good guy out of a bad guy. I need to know if it is what it is and that's it.
Hmm.
And sometimes I don't know what to do with it. I don't have any of the answers to certain things. It's just I want to make sure that I assess this properly, because if it used to be, if I don't assess it, it's not going to be harm or foul. But if I don't assess it and commit that to memory and look for those patterns, it's not just me that's, going to be held responsible. It's Shiro, it's my home.
Hmm.
When we have kids, it'll
Yeah.
be our children.
Right.
And so with that kind of
It's a
responsibility,
very religious principle that you're dancing around, acknowledging that you have
right.
internalized. Yes, indeed. Very
Right.
much.
And so it's a lot to put on yourself. And so that's why we check in with each other, just to make sure, hey, I want to make sure I did this properly. Even if I didn't, let me know, please, because I need to check and make sure that I've assessed this as objectively as possible. So that's why, I'm glad we get to go on and talk about these things. Like, I know that Justin Ice did our conversation on conservatives too, because I saw a lot of things that had happened between, you know, a lot of Crowder, Daily Wire, and all these other people popping up. And it's
Mm,
like,
yeah, yeah,
you're trying to say you're holding up this moral good, but you're acting the same as the liberals who
yeah.
don't
My
like.
son,
And
my son was really blowing me up on during that time frame, and I told him, I said, here's the thing, man. You've put people on pedestals.
right.
So
And
your
that, and
first rule right there is you don't know these people.
no
So don't
pedestals.
put. I
Right.
says, listen, you're my son. Don't put me on a pedestal because I'm going to
Nope.
let you down.
I
So
messed up.
just no. Dad didn't have a handbook. I'm still apologizing for stuff I did wrong. But moral compasses or not, when you pull the curtain back too, there's also, you're talking about a room full of multimillionaires who are squabbling. For some reason, they went public with their squabbles and their
Right.
disagreements over how certain things could move forward. And I found it all very off-putting because I have other things to do. So that's the problem they don't seem to understand. Is like it's no big deal for me to just go do something else and watch something else.
Right.
And that's what I think they don't understand in today's world is we have like so much information. We have more information than millions of lifetimes at this point.
Yeah.
I listen to pieces
Yeah. Yeah.
of
Yeah.
podcasts and stuff. I listen to
Okay.
sections of things. Like I'm really down a rabbit's hole where I do a lot of Chris Williamson, a lot of Andrew. Have you heard of Andrew Huberman?
No, who's that?
He's so influential on sort of like he's a neuroscientist who gives advice and science on like how to improve your health and wellness and things like that. But it's like it's a lot about like advising, cold plunges and how to
Oh,
detox and how you need to get sun first thing in the morning.
I
Anyway, so
like
there's
that.
men that watch this stuff, and these are the men that women want to get now. Like they call them Huberman husbands. So like if you could just pretend to be a Huberman listener, I guess it would be good for your dating life. I don't know, folks, but I ended up in these rabbit holes of like I didn't even know these things existed. I didn't even
Right.
know what does that mean? So now I'm down the rabbit hole of okay, well, what does that mean? What does this mean? How does that help
Mhm.
people? How does that not help people? What do we? Because at
Right.
least there are people interested in asking those questions, which is at
Right.
least way
That's the
more
main
interesting
thing.
than
Right.
turning on the news to see the same reruns of the same. I feel like it's as bad as watching another Dallas Giants game. I just don't care. Hashtag cannoli. It's a rough year for you, brother.
No.
See what I did there?
Oh man, guys, I can't do any better than that, guys. So we're gonna have to end it here. Thank you for joining us in this just wide-ranging topic of libertarianism, from listening to our beginnings and winding through what almost 15 years of the journey to where we are today. If you guys have questions, comments, or anything like that about general
Please.
libertarianism, please message us. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, wherever you can
Yep.
find us, even in this video in the comment section as well. Especially if you have people that you actually listen to that we didn't mention, because we're always on the hunt to hear more libertarians speak their mind. But guys, for Pops and for myself, guys, we are out.